I pressed play on the security footage, and what I saw on that screen stopped my heart. My husband, the man I'd buried 5 years ago, the man I'd spent countless nights crying over, the man I'd paid $200 a month to his parents because of the debt he'd left behind, was walking up the stairs of a warehouse in the middle of the night like he was coming home from work. He was alive. And worse, he'd been watching me suffer the entire time. That moment changed everything. But it started 3 weeks earlier, on an ordinary Tuesday, when my neighbor downstairs, Mrs. Chen, knocked on my door with a strange smile on her face and said, "Amara, honey, I think you need to see something. My name is Amara. I'm 32 years old now, and I've learned that the people closest to you can destroy you in ways you never imagined. For 5 years, I had been living a life of quiet sacrifice. Every 5th of the month, without exception, I would set aside $200 from my paycheck as a medical technician and drive it to my in-laws' house in Overtown, Miami. The money was supposed to be paying off a debt that Marcus had left behind when he died in that oil rig accident in the Gulf of Mexico. $12,000. That's what his parents told me he'd borrowed from them before he left. That's what they said I was responsible for now that he was gone. $200 a month for 5 years equals $12,000. I'd completed the debt just last month, one final payment. After that, I was supposed to be free. But freedom, I was learning, is something liars dangle in front of you to keep you working. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Kendall, a neighborhood just south of Miami that's filled with young families trying to make it. My son, DeAndre, was 8 years old now. He had his father's eyes, dark, curious, intelligent eyes that looked at the world like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. Every morning, I'd get him ready for school, pack his lunch, kiss him on the forehead, and tell him Mama was going to work hard so he could have a good life. Every afternoon, I'd pick him up, help him with his homework, make him dinner, and lie in bed at night wondering if I was doing enough. The truth was, I wasn't doing enough because most of my money was going to people who didn't deserve it. Mrs. Chen lived in the apartment directly below mine. She was a widow in her 70s, a tiny woman with white hair who wore colorful scarves and always smelled like jasmine and ginger. She'd lived in that building longer than anyone else, and she seemed to know everything that happened there. Who was fighting, who was cheating, who was dealing drugs out of their apartment. She was kind to DeAndre, always slipping him cookies when we ran into her in the hallway, and she had a way of looking at people like she could see straight through their lies. That Tuesday, I was getting ready to go to the hospital for the evening shift. It was around 4 in the afternoon, and the sun was still bright and heavy outside. I was straightening my scrubs when I heard the knock. I opened the door, and there was Mrs. Chen, standing with her hands on her hips, and that strange smile I mentioned. "Hi, Mrs. Chen," I said, confused. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is not okay," she said, and her accent made the words sound more serious. "Can I come in?" I let her in. She walked into my living room, looked around like she was making sure we were alone, and then she sat down on my couch, like she owned it. "Amara, how long have you been living here?" she asked. 3 years, I said. "Since after Marcus died. I downsized so I could save money." She nodded slowly. "And you go to your in-laws' house every month?" "Yes," I said. "On the 5th. How did you—" "I see you leave," she said simply. "Same day, same time. You look tired every time you come back." I didn't know what to say. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but Mrs. Chen didn't seem to have malicious intent. She just seemed concerned. "Mrs. Chen, what's this about?" She leaned forward, and her expression became serious. 2 weeks ago, I couldn't sleep. The heat was too much. I was on my balcony smoking a cigarette. Don't tell my daughter I still smoke. And I saw something strange. "What?" I asked. "A man," she said. "He came up the back stairs of this building. It was around 2 in the morning. He had his face covered, wearing a baseball cap and a mask, but the way he moved— Amara, the way he walked reminded me of someone." My stomach tightened. "Mrs. Chen, there are a lot of men who walk the same way." Yes, she agreed. But this man had a key to your apartment. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's not possible. No one has a key to my apartment except me and my mother. Then explain why this man used a key to open your door at 2 in the morning, Mrs. Chen said calmly. And why he stayed inside for 20 minutes, and why when he left, he was carrying a large envelope. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like someone had put their hands around it and was squeezing. It couldn't have been my apartment, I whispered. It was, Mrs. Chen said. I watched him come back 2 weeks later, and then again last week, the same time, the same routine. He comes, he stays for about 20 minutes, and he leaves with an envelope. Did you see his face? I asked. No, she said. But Amara, the building has cameras now. In the hallway, on the stairs. The management company installed them 3 months ago after some robberies. You should check the footage. After Mrs. Chen left, I sat in my apartment for hours without moving. My mind was racing, trying to explain what she'd told me. The logical part of me said it was impossible. My apartment was secure. No one could get in without me knowing. But another part of me, a part that had been sensing something wrong for a long time, believed her completely. That night, I called the building management and asked about the security footage. The manager, a man named Gerald, was hesitant at first. He said they had privacy policies. But I told him I suspected someone had been in my apartment, and he agreed to show me the tapes. The next evening, after dropping DeAndre at my mother's house, I went to Gerald's office in the lobby of the building. He was a large man with a tired face, the kind of person who'd seen a lot of Miami's underbelly and had learned not to be surprised by anything. These are from the last month, he said, pulling up footage on his computer. Which dates do you want to look at? Start from 2 weeks ago, I said. He scrolled through the footage. Nothing happened for a while. Just people coming and going, mail being delivered, nothing unusual. Then, around 2:15 a.m., a figure appeared on the screen. He was wearing dark clothes, a baseball cap pulled low, and a surgical mask. He moved with purpose up the back stairs, not hesitating, not looking around nervously. He moved like someone who belonged there. When he reached my floor, he didn't need to check the apartment number. He went straight to my door, pulled a key from his pocket, and opened it. The footage was black and white and grainy, but I could see him clearly enough. I could see his hands. I could see the way he moved. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might be having a heart attack. Do you recognize him? Gerald asked. I couldn't answer. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. Can you zoom in on his face? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to see it. The resolution isn't great, Gerald said, but I can try. He zoomed in. The image became pixelated, but I could see more detail, the shape of his jaw, the line of his nose, the way he stood, with his left shoulder slightly lower than his right, a posture he'd developed after a motorcycle accident years ago. Rewind it, I said. Show me again. Gerald played the footage again. The man climbed the stairs. The man opened my door. The man went inside. It was impossible. It was completely impossible. Can you show me the other dates? I asked. Gerald pulled up the footage from a week later. Same time, 2:15 a.m. Same figure, same routine, same key, same entrance into my apartment, and then, just 5 days ago, the same thing. I'm going to need copies of this, I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from someone else's body. Are you going to call the police? Gerald asked. I didn't answer. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what any of this meant. I drove around Miami for hours that night, trying to process what I'd seen. My mind kept rejecting the obvious conclusion, because the obvious conclusion was insane. It was impossible. It was the kind of thing that didn't happen in real life. But I knew that walk. I knew that posture. I knew that way of moving through the world like you owned it. I knew it because I'd known it for 8 years. I knew it because I'd loved it. I'd woken up next to it. I'd made love to it. I'd buried it. That night, I drove to Overtown and parked outside my in-laws' house. It was a small, modest home, painted a faded yellow, with a small porch and bars on the windows. The lights were off. It was nearly midnight. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at that house, trying to figure out what was happening. Then, around 1:45 a.m., I saw headlights turn onto the street. A dark sedan pulled up in front of the house. A man got out. He was wearing dark clothes and a cap, and even though his face was obscured, I knew. I knew from the way he moved. I knew from the shape of him. I knew from the bone-deep recognition that travels through your body when you see someone you love. Marcus walked to the front door of his parents' house and used a key to let himself inside. My husband, the man I'd buried 5 years ago, was very much alive. I didn't sleep that night. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my mind caught in a loop of denial and horrifying clarity. I kept telling myself it wasn't him. It couldn't be him. But I knew better. I knew that walk. I knew that key. I knew the way he moved through the world, like gravity didn't apply to him the same way it did to everyone else. By the time I got home, it was 3 a.m, and my hands were still trembling so badly I could barely unlock my apartment door. I went to the bathroom and threw up. Then I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and tried to figure out what to do. The rational part of my brain kept insisting there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was someone who looked like Marcus. Maybe it was a cousin or a distant relative I'd never met. Maybe the grainy security footage was playing tricks on me, and my mind was filling in details that weren't actually there because I was already primed by Mrs. Chen's story. But the other part of me, the part that knows a man's body the way only a wife can, knew exactly what I'd seen. I called in sick to the hospital. I told them I had a migraine and wouldn't be able to work my shift. Then I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago and tried to think. I had to be smart about this. I had to gather evidence. I had to know for certain before I accused my not dead, husband of the cruelest betrayal I could imagine. Around 7 a.m, I called my mother and asked her to keep DeAndre for another day. She didn't ask questions. She never did. She just said she'd pick him up from school and keep him overnight. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His name was Devin, and he'd been Marcus's best friend since childhood. They'd gone to the same high school, the same college, and they'd stayed close even after I entered the picture and changed everything. Devin was a detective with the Miami Police Department. I'd always liked him, even though there was an awkwardness between us after Marcus and I got married. I think he'd had feelings for me at one point, but he'd been professional about it. Now I was calling him because I needed help, and I didn't know who else to turn to. "Amara?" he said when he answered the phone. His voice was surprised. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said. "Devin, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." There was a pause. "Okay, what is it?" How would I find out if someone had broken into my apartment without forcing the lock? How would someone do that without leaving any signs? "That's a specific question," he said carefully. "Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" "Just answer the question," I said. "A key," he said. "The simplest way is if they had a key. Otherwise, they'd need to pick the lock, which usually leaves marks, or they'd need to break in through a window, but a key is the easiest way." "Thank you," I said. "Amara, what's going on?" I hung up. I spent the rest of the day researching. I went online and looked up everything I could about Marcus. His social media accounts were still active, frozen in time from 5 years ago. The last photo he'd posted was of me and DeAndre, taken 2 weeks before he left for the Gulf. He looked happy in that photo. He looked like a man with a future. I searched for news articles about the oil rig accident. There were several. The accident had happened on March 14th, 5 years ago. A worker named Marcus Patterson had fallen from a platform during maintenance work. His body had been recovered after 2 days in the water. The company had issued a statement expressing condolences. There was even a photo of the platform, a massive structure in the middle of the Gulf, stretching into the sky like a monument to human ambition and human fragility. Everything about the story had seemed real at the time. The company representative who called with the news had sounded genuine. The cremation had happened quickly, which made sense given the condition of the body. My in-laws had seemed devastated, though now that I thought about it, I'd spent most of that time in my own grief, too broken to really pay attention to theirs. Had they known? Had Marcus's parents been in on this the entire time? Had they conspired with their son to take money from me while I worked myself to exhaustion? The thought made me feel sick. I needed more evidence. I needed to know when Marcus had come back, where he'd been staying, what he'd been doing. I needed to understand the scope of this deception. The next morning, I called Gerald again and asked him to email me all the security footage from the last 3 months. He seemed hesitant, but I told him it was a police matter, and he complied. I spent the entire day watching grainy black and white footage of my hallway, looking for patterns. There were 3 visits. The first was 14 days ago at 2:15 a.m. The second was 7 days later, at almost the same time. The third was 5 days ago. Each time, he stayed for approximately 20 minutes. Each time, he left with an envelope. I realized I needed to know what was in those envelopes. I needed to know if Marcus was stealing from me or if there was something else happening. That evening, after picking up DeAndre from my mother's house, I made a decision. I would confront my in-laws. I would show up at their house and demand answers. I would force them to tell me what was going on. But first, I needed to be prepared. I needed to think like the detective I'd called, not like the betrayed woman I was. I needed to gather evidence before I made my move. I called an old friend named Jasmine, who worked in IT for a tech company in Brickell. We'd gone to high school together, and she'd always been the smartest person I knew. When I explained what I needed, someone to help me access security footage and trace patterns of movement, she didn't hesitate. "This is serious," she said when I told her what I'd discovered. "I know," I said. "No, I mean this is really serious. If someone has access to your apartment, you need to change your locks." "I will," I said. "But first, I need to understand what's happening." Jasmine met me at a coffee shop in Kendall the next day. I brought a laptop and the USB drive that Gerald had given me with the security footage. Jasmine was a tall woman with box braids and sharp eyes, the kind of woman who looked like she could solve any problem. She opened the footage and started to analyze it. "Okay," she said. "So this person comes to your apartment 3 times in 3 weeks. Each time is in the middle of the night. Each time they have a key. And each time they leave with something." "An envelope," I said. "Do you know what's in the envelope?" "No, but I have a theory. There's money missing from my apartment. Nothing else is taken, but cash that I keep in a drawer has been disappearing." Jasmine was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Amara, do you know who this person is?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't say it out loud. If I said it out loud, it would become real. It would become true in a way that it wasn't quite yet. "I think it might be someone I used to know," I said finally. "Someone I thought was dead." Jasmine looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "We need to get more footage. We need to see his face. Do you have any cameras that might have captured better images?" I thought about it. "My building's cameras are grainy, but I have a doorbell camera. I installed it myself 2 years ago for safety." "Does it record?" Jasmine asked. "It should," I said. "To the cloud. I can access it from my phone." I pulled up the doorbell camera footage. The resolution was better than the security cameras in the hallway, but the footage only went back 30 days, and I needed to find the right dates. I scrolled back to 14 days ago and looked at 2:15 a.m. There he was. My doorbell camera had captured him clearly enough to see his face. He was wearing a mask and a cap, but part of his face was visible. I could see his eyes. I could see the line of his jaw. I could see the distinctive scar on his left temple from a car accident when he was 17. It was Marcus. There was no doubt anymore. It was definitely, absolutely, unmistakably my husband. "Oh my God," Jasmine whispered. "Do you know who that is?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I know exactly who that is." "Who?" "My husband," I said. "The man I thought died 5 years ago." Jasmine didn't ask any more questions after that. She just said she would help me figure out what to do next. She said she had a friend who could help trace financial movements, and she said I should probably go to the police. But I told her I wasn't ready for that yet. I needed to confront Marcus first. I needed to hear from his own mouth why he'd done this to me. I needed to understand. That Friday, I made a plan. My in-laws usually went to church on Sunday mornings. During that time, the house would be empty. If Marcus was going to visit, and based on the pattern, he usually came on Tuesday nights, I could break in and wait for him. I knew that wasn't legal. I knew that breaking and entering was a crime, even if it was my father-in-law's house. But at that moment, I didn't care about legal. I cared about truth. I cared about justice. I cared about getting answers. On Sunday morning, I told my mother I was going to work, but instead, I drove to Overtown with a lock-picking kit that Jasmine had helped me acquire. My hands were shaking as I walked up to the small yellow house. The neighborhood was quiet. Most people were at church or still asleep. I used the lock-picking kit to open the front door. It took me 15 minutes, and I was sure someone would come out and catch me, but nobody did. I let myself inside. The house smelled like old people, like mothballs, and the faint scent of arthritis cream, and something else I couldn't quite identify. The interior was dim, with heavy curtains drawn over all the windows. Furniture from the 1980s sat in various states of wear. A crucifix hung on the wall above the television. Photos of Marcus covered one entire shelf, his progression from childhood to adulthood frozen in time. I found the bedroom at the back of the house that had clearly been used recently. There was a sleeping bag on the bed. Marcus didn't even have the decency to use the actual sheets, and there was a duffel bag in the corner. I opened it and found clothes, money, stacks of it, and a phone. My heart was racing as I picked up the phone. It wasn't locked. I scrolled through the recent calls. My phone number appeared multiple times. My in-laws' number appeared multiple times. And there was a number I didn't recognize, called dozens of times. I took a photo of the phone screen with my own phone, documenting everything. Then I heard a car pull up outside. I froze. It was only 11 a.m. My in-laws shouldn't be back from church yet. I moved quietly to the front window and peeked through the curtain. It was Marcus. He got out of a dark sedan, and even though it was broad daylight, he was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. He looked around before walking to the front door. He let himself in with his key, and I heard him call out, "Ma! Pop?" When there was no answer, he walked directly to the back bedroom, the bedroom where I was hiding. I was crouched behind the door, my phone in my hand, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. He came into the room, and for a moment he didn't see me. He looked at his duffel bag, and I saw his face go pale. Then he saw me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. 5 years of grief, 5 years of sacrifice, 5 years of believing in a lie. It all collapsed in that single moment. "Amara," he said, and his voice was shocked. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I repeated. My voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be dead." Marcus's face cycled through several emotions: shock, fear, anger, and then, somehow, something that looked like pity. "You weren't supposed to find out," he said quietly. "Find out what?" I demanded. "That you're alive? That you've been letting me pay off a fake debt for 5 years? That you've been stealing from my apartment? That your parents have been part of this the whole time?" "It's not that simple," Marcus said. "Then explain it to me," I said. "Explain it to me right now, or I'm going to the police with everything I have." Marcus sat down on the edge of his bed, the bed with the sleeping bag, and put his head in his hands. For a moment, He didn't say anything. Then he looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. It was a coldness, a calculation, a complete absence of the person I thought I'd married. "I owe money to people," he said finally. "Dangerous people. When I went to the Gulf, I was supposed to make money for the family. Instead, I got into gambling. I lost everything. I owe $500,000 to people who don't forgive debts." I felt my knees go weak. $500,000. "So you faked your own death?" I asked. "My parents helped me," he said. "Mr. Coleman, the company representative, he's an old friend of my father's. He helped us arrange everything. It was supposed to be simple. You'd grieve for a while, move on, rebuild your life. I'd disappear for a few years until the people I owed money to forgot about me or decided the debt wasn't worth pursuing." "And the $12,000? I demanded. "The debt you said you left behind?" "There was no debt," Marcus said flatly. "That was part of the plan. We needed a way for my parents to have income without it looking suspicious. If you were paying them money every month, it would explain where their money was coming from if anyone asked. It was cover." I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like my entire world had just collapsed. "And the money?" I asked. "Where has it been going?" "My parents keep it," Marcus said. "And I've been using your apartment to pick up cash that I get from other sources. I need money to survive, Amara. I can't get a real job. I can't use my real name. I can't go anywhere without looking over my shoulder." "Good," I said. My voice was shaking with rage. "You deserve that. You deserve worse than that." Marcus stood up, and for a moment, I thought he was going to hurt me. But he didn't. He just looked at me with that cold, calculated expression, and he said, "What are you going to do?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken of his phone screen. I showed him the footage from the doorbell camera. I showed him all the evidence I'd gathered. "I'm going to the police," I said. "I'm going to tell them everything. I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done to me and to our son." "If you do that," Marcus said quietly, "the people I owe money to will know I'm still alive. They will find me. And when they find me, they will kill me. And then they might come looking for you and DeAndre to send a message." I felt my resolve waver for just a moment. Then I remembered all those nights when I worked extra shifts to make ends meet. I remembered all the times I told DeAndre I couldn't afford something he wanted. I remembered the weight of that $200 payment every month, the way it had stolen from my life and my future. "That's not my problem," I said coldly. "You made your choices. Now you get to live with them." I walked past him and went back through the house. I let myself out of the front door and drove away. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to pull over twice before I made it home. That night, I called Devin again. I told him everything. I gave him the footage, the photos, all the evidence. He listened without interrupting, and when I was done, he said he would file a report and that I should file one too. "But Amara," he said carefully, "you need to know that what Marcus said about the people he owes money to, that might be true. That might be a real threat." "I don't care," I said. "I'm done protecting him. I'm done sacrificing for him. I want justice, and I want it now." The police came to my in-laws' house on a Tuesday morning. I watched from a distance as they arrested Marcus in the front yard. He didn't resist. He just let them put handcuffs on him and lead him to the patrol car. My father-in-law, Robert, stood on the porch with his hands raised, looking like a man who'd been caught in something much larger than he'd anticipated. My mother-in-law, Diane, didn't come out at all. She stayed inside the house, hidden behind those heavy curtains that had always made their home feel like a tomb. Devin had handled everything with professional efficiency. He'd filed the report, gathered the evidence, and made sure that the charges were serious. Wire fraud, document forgery, theft, identity fraud. The list went on. When Marcus was formally charged, he faced potentially 15 years in prison. But the real nightmare was just beginning. 3 days after Marcus's arrest, I was leaving work when I noticed a car following me. It was a dark sedan, the same kind that Marcus had been driving. My heart rate spiked. I drove straight to the police station instead of going home, and when I got there, the car disappeared. Devin met me in the lobby, and I told him what had happened. "We're going to increase security," he said. "We're going to put a patrol car near your apartment building. We're going to monitor your movements." "Is he going to come after me?" I asked. "Is he going to—" "I don't know," Devin said honestly, "but we're going to take precautions." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and listened to every sound in my apartment, convinced that Marcus or someone working for him was going to break through my door. I jumped at shadows. I checked the locks 5 times before I finally fell asleep at 4 in the morning. The next day, I received a letter at work. It was in an unmarked envelope, and when I opened it, I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Marcus's. "Amara, I know you're scared. I know you think I'm going to hurt you, but I need you to listen to me. The people I owe money to are very real, and they're very dangerous. When they find out I'm alive, they're going to come looking for me, and they're going to come looking for you and DeAndre because they're going to think you know where I am or what I have. If you drop the charges, I can disappear again. I can leave Miami, leave Florida, leave everything. The threat will go away. Your son will be safe. But if you insist on this legal battle, I can't protect you. Nobody can. These people don't care about the law. They don't care about consequences. They care about money and revenge. Think about DeAndre. Think about what's really important here. Marcus." I showed the letter to Devin. He read it and said it was a threat and that it would be used as evidence. But I also saw something in his expression. A flicker of concern. A recognition that maybe Marcus's warning wasn't entirely empty. "Is he right?" I asked Devin. "Are we in real danger?" Devin was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "There's always a possibility, but you can't let fear dictate your choices. If you do that, people like Marcus win. They get to hurt you and escape consequences." I thought about what he'd said. I thought about DeAndre, who was 9 years old now and still didn't fully understand what had happened. I thought about my in-laws, who had conspired with their son to steal from me. I thought about all those nights working double shifts, all that money I'd handed over, all those years of believing a lie. "I'm not dropping the charges," I told Devin. But fear had settled into my bones. I started taking different routes to work. I parked my car in well-lit areas. I installed a security system in my apartment. I bought a gun and took a firearm safety course. I became hyper-vigilant, always aware of my surroundings, always ready for a threat. 3 weeks into the investigation, my in-laws' house was searched. The police found over $200,000 in cash hidden in the walls. They found documents detailing years of money transfers and financial manipulation. They found proof that my father-in-law had helped create the fake death certificate. They found evidence of credit card fraud that had been committed in my name. When I learned about the credit card fraud, I felt something break inside me. They hadn't just stolen my money. They'd stolen my identity. They'd used my name to accumulate debt. They'd violated me in ways that went far beyond the $12,000. My mother called me that night, crying. "I don't understand how people can do this to their own family," she said. "I don't understand how Marcus could hurt his own child." "Because he's a monster," I said flatly. "And his parents are monsters too. And I was too stupid to see it." "You're not stupid," my mother said. "You loved him. That's not stupid. That's just being human." But I didn't feel human. I felt like I'd been hollowed out, like everything I'd believed about love and family and loyalty had been a lie. I went through the motions of living, going to work, picking up DeAndre, making dinner, helping with homework, but I felt like a ghost moving through someone else's life. The trial was scheduled for 8 months later. During that time, my father-in-law had a stroke. He ended up in a nursing home, unable to speak, unable to care for himself. I felt a dark satisfaction when I heard the news. I didn't feel guilty about it. I didn't feel empathy. He had conspired to steal from me. He deserved whatever suffering came his way. My mother-in-law, Diane, disappeared. She left Miami without telling anyone where she was going. The police tried to locate her, but it was like she'd vanished into thin air. Years later, I would find out that she'd moved to a small town in Georgia and remarried under an assumed name. But at the time, her disappearance just added to the sense that my entire life had been built on deception. 2 weeks before the trial, I received another letter from Marcus. This one was even more personal. Amara, I've been thinking about the night you found me in my parents' house. I've been replaying that moment over and over, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. The truth is, it went wrong the moment I decided to gamble away our future. It went wrong the moment I chose money and escape over facing my consequences. I know you'll never forgive me. I know that anything I say will seem hollow and manipulative, because honestly, I'm not even sure I'm capable of real remorse. But I want you to know that DeAndre didn't deserve any of this. He didn't deserve to grow up with a father who didn't exist. He didn't deserve to have his mother working herself to death to pay off a fake debt. I messed up. I messed up so badly that I can't even see the beginning of how deep the damage goes. But I want you to take this money and use it to build a better life for you and our son. Not because it erases what I've done, but because it's the only thing I can give you that might actually help. The money came from sources that are clean enough that they can't be traced. You can use it without legal consequences. Tell DeAndre that his father was a coward who took the easy way out instead of fighting for his family. Tell him that he should never be like me. Tell him to be better than me. And Amara, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of it. Marcus. He enclosed a cashier's check for $40,000. I stared at that check for a long time. $40,000. It was enough to change my life. It was enough to pay off my remaining debts, enough to buy a used car that didn't shake when I drove it, enough to send DeAndre to a better school, enough to take a breath for the first time in 5 years. But I also recognized it for what it was, a manipulation. Even in prison, even facing 15 years, Marcus was trying to control me. He was trying to buy my forgiveness. He was trying to soften my anger with money that had probably come from crimes even darker than the ones he was already charged with. I brought the check to Devin. This could be legitimate, he said after examining it, but it could also be money from illegal sources. If you cash it, you could be implicated in money laundering. So I can't take it, I said. Not safely, Devin agreed. I tore the check up. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for hours about the fake debt, about the monthly payments, about finding Marcus in his parents' house, about the psychological toll of discovering that my entire life had been built on a lie. The prosecutor presented all the evidence, the security footage, the financial records, the fraudulent documents. Marcus's lawyer tried to paint him as a desperate man who'd made bad choices, but it was a weak defense. On the final day of the trial, the jury deliberated for 6 hours. Then they came back with a verdict: guilty on all counts. Marcus was sentenced to 14 years in prison. He would be eligible for parole after serving 8. But that was still 8 years. 8 years before I could stop looking over my shoulder. 8 years before I could stop worrying about what might happen when he got out. My in-laws faced their own legal battles. My father-in-law, still incapacitated from his stroke, had charges filed against him, but ultimately never went to trial due to his condition. My mother-in-law remained a fugitive, but the money was recovered. All $200,000 that had been hidden in the walls of their house was seized as proceeds of fraud and eventually returned to me. $200,000. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. When the funds were transferred to my account, I sat at my kitchen table and cried. I cried for all the nights I'd worked overtime. I cried for all the times I'd told DeAndre no. I cried for the 5 years I'd spent mourning a man who was alive the whole time. I cried for the version of myself that had trusted so completely, that had believed so deeply in family and loyalty and love. I used the money to pay off my debts. I bought a condo in a good neighborhood. I put money away for DeAndre's college fund. I took a promotion at the hospital that meant I wouldn't have to work overtime anymore. I rebuilt my life. But the scars remained. I became someone who didn't trust easily. I became someone who always checked the details, who always verified information, who always assumed that people had hidden motives. I became harder, colder, less willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. DeAndre asked me about his father sometimes. He wanted to know why Daddy was in prison. He wanted to know if he could visit him. He wanted to know if his father loved him. I struggled with how to answer those questions. I wanted to shield him from the truth, but I also wanted him to understand that actions have consequences, that people are capable of terrible things, that love doesn't mean someone is trustworthy. Your father made some very bad choices, I told him finally. He hurt a lot of people, including me and you. He's in prison because he broke the law. And no, I don't think you should visit him. Some people aren't safe to be around, and your father is one of them. DeAndre was quiet for a moment, and then he asked, "Am I like him?" "No," I said firmly. "You're like me. You're strong. You're honest. You're going to be so much better than him." "Promise?" DeAndre asked. "I promise," I said. 6 months after the trial ended, I was at work when I got a message from Jasmine. She'd been following Marcus's case in the news, and she wanted to meet me for coffee. When we met, she gave me a hug and told me she was proud of me for going through with the prosecution. "A lot of people would have just taken the money and tried to move on," she said. "I thought about it," I admitted, "but I couldn't let him win. I couldn't let him think that what he did was okay, that he could hurt people and just pay them off to make it go away." Jasmine nodded. "You're stronger than you realize," she said. "Or maybe I'm just angrier," I said. "Maybe that too," Jasmine said with a smile. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, I was promoted to senior medical technician. My salary increased by 30%. I was able to buy a car that didn't shake, and I was able to send DeAndre to a private school where he excelled in his classes and made friends who came from stable homes. Life became routine again, quiet, normal. I went to work, I picked up DeAndre, I made dinner, we did homework together, and on weekends we went to movies or the beach. It was a simple life, but it was a good life. It was a life that was entirely my own, not shadowed by someone else's lies and manipulation. But I never forgot. I never let my guard down completely. I never stopped checking the locks on my doors or being aware of who was around me. I never stopped thinking about what it meant to love someone so completely that you were willing to sacrifice everything for them, only to discover that they'd been using your sacrifice as a weapon against you. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I thought about the version of me that had existed before all of this. The younger, more naive version that had believed in happy endings and true love and the fundamental goodness of family. That version of me was gone. She had been replaced by someone harder, someone more cautious, someone who understood that the world was full of people willing to hurt you for their own benefit. I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. I just knew it was true. 5 years after Marcus's conviction, I received a phone call that I'd been dreading since the moment he was sentenced. It was Devin. "Amara," he said, his voice careful and measured. "Marcus has been granted parole. He's being released in 2 weeks." The world seemed to tilt. I was at work when he called, and I had to excuse myself and go into the break room. I sat down on one of the plastic chairs and tried to breathe. "He served 8 years, Devin continued. "Good behavior. The parole board decided he was eligible and approved his release." "Can they do that?" I asked, even though I knew they could. I'd known this was possible. I'd known it could happen. But knowing something intellectually and experiencing it emotionally are 2 different things. "Yes," Devin said. "I'm sorry, Amara, but there are conditions. He has to check in with a parole officer weekly. He has to stay within a 50-mile radius of Miami. He can't contact you or DeAndre. He can't come near your home or your workplace. If he violates any of these conditions, he goes back to prison." "And if he does contact us?" I asked. "What happens then?" "He goes back to prison," Devin repeated, "for a very long time." After I hung up, I sat in that break room for 30 minutes without moving. My coworkers left me alone. They'd learned long ago not to ask questions about my personal life. They just knew that sometimes I needed space, and they respected that. When I finally went home that evening, I found DeAndre doing homework at the kitchen table. He was 14 now, tall and lean, with my eyes and his father's stubborn chin. He looked up when I came in. "Hey, Mom," he said. "How was work?" "Fine," I said, which was a lie. "Sweetie, we need to talk about something." He put his pencil down. He was old enough now to recognize when something serious was happening. "Is everything okay?" I sat down across from him and took a deep breath. "Your father is being released from prison," I said. "He's getting parole." DeAndre's face went pale. "When?" "In 2 weeks," I said. "But I want you to know that he's not allowed to contact us. The parole conditions are very strict. If he tries to see us or talk to us, he'll go back to prison." "Do you think he will?" DeAndre asked. "Do you think he'll try to contact us?" I honestly didn't know. In all the years Marcus had been in prison, he'd never tried to reach out to DeAndre. He'd never sent letters or messages. It was like, once he was incarcerated, he'd simply erased us from his life, the way he'd erased himself from his previous life. "I don't know," I told DeAndre honestly. "But I want you to be prepared. If he does try to contact you through any means, phone call, text message, social media, anything, I want you to tell me immediately. And don't engage with him, don't respond. Just tell me." "Okay," DeAndre said quietly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Marcus being out in the world again. I kept imagining him walking the streets of Miami, eating at restaurants, maybe building some kind of life. I kept wondering if he thought about me and DeAndre, or if, in his mind, we'd become abstractions, people he'd hurt but no longer had to think about. The next morning, I called my lawyer and asked about getting a restraining order. She told me that I could file one based on the history of fraud and the ongoing threat that Marcus posed, but it would require going to court, and Marcus would have the opportunity to contest it. "He probably won't contest it," my lawyer said. "Violating a restraining order would be grounds for immediate reincarceration, and he knows that. But legally, he can." I decided to file anyway. The hearing took place a week later. I had to testify about the fraud, about the fake death, about the psychological trauma. Marcus's parole-appointed lawyer tried to argue that Marcus had served his time and that a restraining order was excessive. But the judge looked at the case file and at me, sitting in the witness stand, and she didn't hesitate. "Restraining order granted," she said. "Mr. Patterson is to remain at least 500 yards away from Ms. Amara Van, her residence, her workplace, and her minor son at all times. Any violation will result in immediate reincarceration." I felt a small sense of relief when I left the courthouse, but it was fragile. A restraining order is just a piece of paper. It's only as effective as the person serving it is willing to enforce it. That weekend, DeAndre asked if he could visit his father. I was shocked. I'd prepared him for the possibility that Marcus might try to contact him, but I hadn't expected DeAndre to ask to contact Marcus. "Why would you want to do that?" I asked carefully, not wanting to shut down the conversation. "Because he's my father," DeAndre said, "and I want to know who he is. Not who you've told me he is, but who he actually is." I understood the impulse. DeAndre was at an age where he was trying to figure out his own identity, and that identity was intrinsically tied to the man who donated half his DNA. He wanted to meet his father, to see if they had things in common, to understand where he came from. "I can't stop you," I said finally. "But I think you should know that your father is not a good man. He's lied to us. He's hurt us. And I don't trust him." "I know all that," DeAndre said, "but I still want to meet him." I made an appointment with a therapist who specialized in family trauma. DeAndre went to a few sessions, and the therapist helped him think through what he wanted from a relationship with Marcus and what he needed to protect himself emotionally. In the end, DeAndre decided to write a letter to Marcus. He didn't send it right away. He rewrote it 5 times, struggling with what he wanted to say. Finally, he settled on this. Dear Dad, I'm DeAndre. I'm 14 years old. I don't remember you very well because I was only 3 when you left. My mom raised me alone while working 2 jobs. She told me you died in an accident, and I believed her until I was older, and she told me the truth. I'm not sure if I want to have a relationship with you. I'm not sure if I can trust you. But I want to know who you are, and why you did what you did. If you want to write back, my mom can give you my email address. But I want you to know that if you lie to me or hurt my mom again, I'll never speak to you again. DeAndre. I helped him send the letter to Marcus through his parole officer. I didn't think Marcus would respond. I thought he would either ignore it or send something manipulative designed to draw DeAndre in. But a month later, a letter arrived. DeAndre, thank you for writing to me. I'm sorry that I wasn't there for you when you were growing up. I'm sorry that my choices caused your mother pain and made your childhood harder than it should have been. You asked me why I did what I did. The honest answer is that I was a coward. I made bad decisions, and instead of facing the consequences, I ran. I hid, I lied. And in doing so, I hurt the 2 people who loved me most. I can't undo any of that. I can't go back in time and make different choices. All I can do is acknowledge what I did and try to be better going forward. I don't know if you want to know me. I don't know if that's possible or healthy for you. But I want you to know that I think about you every day. I think about the person you're becoming and hope that you become everything I wasn't. If you want to write back, I would like that. If you don't, I understand. Dad. DeAndre read the letter multiple times. He didn't show it to me immediately. He sat with it for a few days, thinking about what it meant and what he wanted to do with it. Finally, he asked if we could meet Marcus in a public place, with me present. I was hesitant, but I also recognized that this was DeAndre's right. He deserved to know his father, even if his father was a deeply flawed and potentially dangerous man. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Miami. I was anxious the entire morning of the meeting. I dressed carefully, did my hair and makeup, tried to project an air of confidence even though my stomach was in knots. DeAndre was nervous too. He kept asking me what to say, how to act, what to do if things got awkward. Just be yourself, I told him. Be honest about what you're feeling. And remember, I'm right here. If you feel uncomfortable at any point, we can leave. Marcus was already at the coffee shop when we arrived. He was sitting at a table in the corner, and he looked older than I remembered. Prison had changed him. He'd lost weight, and his hair had gray in it now. He looked almost fragile, which was an image of Marcus I couldn't quite reconcile with the man I'd known. He stood up when he saw us approach. He looked at me first, and I saw something in his eyes. Regret, shame, longing. But I hardened myself against it. I wasn't here for Marcus. I was here for DeAndre. Thank you for coming, Marcus said to both of us. But he was looking at DeAndre. We sat down. There was an awkward silence. DeAndre was gripping his coffee cup so hard, I thought it might break. Hi, DeAndre said finally. I'm DeAndre. I know, Marcus said, and he smiled. You look like your mother, same eyes, same mouth. But you have my height. DeAndre didn't smile back. Why did you do it? He asked. Why did you fake your death? Why did you let my mom pay you money for years? Marcus took a deep breath. Because I was selfish and afraid, he said. Because I owed money to people who scared me, and I didn't know how to face that. So I ran. And then, when I was running, I realized I needed money to survive. So I used your mother. I used my parents. I lied to everyone because I was too much of a coward to tell the truth. Do you love my mom? DeAndre asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I did. When we first got married, I loved her very much. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being the person she thought I was. And instead of trying to fix that, I just kept lying and running. Do you love me? DeAndre asked. I don't know you well enough to love you, Marcus said, and I appreciated his honesty even as it stung. But I want to know you. I want to be your father if you'll let me. DeAndre looked at me. I nodded, silently telling him that this was his decision to make. I want to know you too, DeAndre said, but I need to know that you're not going to hurt my mom again. I won't, Marcus said. I'm under a restraining order. I can't go near your mother. And honestly, I don't want to. I know what I did to her was unforgivable, but I'm trying to do better. I'm working. I'm going to therapy. I'm trying to understand the choices I've made. Over the next several months, DeAndre and Marcus built a cautious relationship. They met for coffee every 2 weeks. They texted sometimes. They talked about school and work, and the things that teenagers and their fathers talk about. I stayed vigilant. I monitored DeAndre's communications with Marcus. I made sure that Marcus never tried to manipulate him or push him into anything inappropriate. But as time went on, I came to believe that Marcus was actually trying to change. He was working at a restaurant doing prep work, living in a small apartment, following all the conditions of his parole. He never violated the restraining order. He never tried to contact me. He never tried to take advantage of DeAndre. I was suspicious of this reformation at first. I thought it was an act, a way of building trust so that eventually he could hurt us again. But years passed, and his behavior remained consistent. He showed up to his parole meetings. He kept his job. He paid his financial restitution. He was the kind of person who, if you didn't know his history, you might think of as just a quiet man trying to rebuild his life. One day, 10 years after his release from prison, DeAndre told me that he was considering forgiving his father. I don't mean that what he did was okay, DeAndre said. We were sitting in the kitchen of my house, drinking coffee. DeAndre was in college now, studying business. What he did was terrible, but I think he's genuinely trying to be better, and I think holding on to the anger is only hurting me. Forgiveness is a personal choice, I told him, but you should do it for yourself, not for him. You should do it because it will help you move forward, not because you think you owe it to him. I know, DeAndre said, and I think that's what this is. I'm ready to move past this. I'm ready to have a relationship with my father that doesn't require me to hate him. I understood. I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to forgive Marcus. The wound he'd cut into my life was too deep for that. But I could see that DeAndre needed to forgive him, and I could support that. Around this same time, I met someone new. His name was James, and he was a cardiologist at Jackson Memorial Hospital. We worked in different departments, but we kept running into each other in the cafeteria, and eventually he asked me out. I said no the first 2 times. I wasn't sure if I was ready to trust another man, if I was capable of opening my heart again after what Marcus had done to me. But James was patient. He didn't push. He just kept being kind and consistent. And eventually, I said yes to coffee. And then I said yes to dinner. And then, over time, I said yes to letting someone into my life again. When I told DeAndre about James, he was supportive. He'd never held my trauma against me, never blamed me for being cautious about relationships. And when he met James, they got along well. James didn't try to be a father figure. He knew that DeAndre had a father now, even if that relationship was complicated. Instead, he just treated DeAndre with respect and kindness. 2 years into dating James, he proposed. It was a simple proposal. We were walking on the beach at sunset, and he just got down on one knee and asked. I said yes without hesitation. I said yes because I'd learned that love wasn't about never getting hurt. Love was about choosing to trust again, even after you'd been betrayed. The wedding was small, just family and close friends. My mother cried. DeAndre walked me down the aisle. And when I said my vows, I meant every word. I didn't invite Marcus. I didn't think about him that day. I was finally free of him in a way that went deeper than just the legal aspects. I was free of him emotionally. I was free of the burden of carrying his deception. I was free to build a life that was entirely mine. 15 years after the trial, I was working as a senior medical technician at Jackson Memorial Hospital. I'd considered going back to school to become a physician's assistant, but I'd decided against it. I loved my job. I loved helping patients. I loved the sense of purpose that came from doing something meaningful every day. My life had become quiet and normal and good. I had a husband who loved me. I had a son who was becoming a successful young man. I had friends and a career and a home that was mine. I had freedom. Sometimes I thought back to the woman I'd been when I was paying that $200 debt every month. I thought about how broken she was, how desperate, how willing to sacrifice everything for people who didn't deserve her sacrifice. I felt compassion for that version of myself, but I also felt grateful that I'd survived her. The truth I'd learned was this: betrayal is a kind of death. It kills the person you thought you were, the relationships you thought were real, the future you thought you'd have. But death, even the death of your former self, also makes room for something new to grow. I died when I opened that security footage and saw Marcus alive. But from that death, I'd been reborn. I'd become someone stronger, someone more cautious, someone who understood the fragility of trust and the importance of protecting herself. Years later, I ran into Devin at the grocery store. We hadn't spoken in a long time, but when he saw me, he came over and gave me a hug. "How are you doing?" he asked. "I'm good," I said, and I meant it. "Really good." "I'm glad," he said. "You deserved better than what happened to you. I'm glad you got the life you deserved." After he left, I stood in the cereal aisle for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. I thought about the pain and the betrayal and the rage. I thought about the process of healing, which hadn't been linear or easy, but had been necessary. I'd spent 5 years paying a debt that wasn't mine to pay. I'd spent 10 years learning to trust again. And now, at 47 years old, I was finally at peace. The scars would never fully fade. There would always be a part of me that was cautious, that verified information, that didn't trust easily. But those scars had also made me stronger. They'd taught me about my own resilience. They'd shown me that I could survive betrayal and come out the other side not just intact, but better. That evening, I sat on my porch with James and watched the Miami sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. James held my hand, and I thought about how grateful I was to be alive, to be free, to be loved by someone who deserved my trust. In the distance, I could hear children playing. I could hear birds singing. I could hear the sound of the world continuing on, the way it always does, indifferent to the small dramas of human beings, trying to love each other and sometimes failing. But I was no longer defined by those failures. I was no longer haunted by what had been done to me. I was simply a woman living a life, building something beautiful with the pieces that remained after everything had shattered. And that, I realized, was freedom.